It is really interesting because so far this conflict, as we see playing out daily, has largely been contained between Israel and Hamas. But what are the undercurrents of terrorist activity that could be organising at this time?
Yeah, you're right, Bev. It is contained in Gaza at the moment, although we're seeing increasing violence in the West Bank, and there's a connection there. We haven't yet seen problems with Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, but of course that's a great fear. Iran's the really immediate concern. But what we are seeing is a world of people energized by witnessing human suffering. Now we see it with social media, so it's in real time, and it's terrible. That hasn't led to a spike in terrorist attacks around the world, but in the medium to long term, if you think about the battle for hearts and minds, this plays into the hands of extremists. It's going to make it easier for their message to get through. It discredits the West and Western values, and that old argument that is made by groups like Al Qaeda or Islamic State that the West is hypocritical. It doesn't really care for the one quarter of the planet that belongs to the community of Islam. It's talks about justice, but it doesn't deliver. That makes it easier to get that message across.
Yeah. Does that mean that there are sort of smaller, minor extremist groups that will try and capitalise on these events, will try and seek funding from players like Iran?
Yeah, we don't know, but we have to expect that. I mean, one of the mistakes that Israel made was, there was a massive intelligence failure on October 7th with that terrible Hamas attack. And at the heart of that intelligence failure was misreading Hamas, misreading its capacity and its intention. Now, we don't want to overhype the risk of terrorism, but it's very risky to underestimate what might happen. And it's not just jihadi groups that we should be concerned about. We're seeing with millions of people on the streets of cities around the world, far-right groups also will try and push their way in, whether acting in the name of Israel, although they tend to be strongly anti-Semitic, or acting in the name of Palestine, opportunistically trying to make mischief. And of course, there's the immediate danger of lone actor attacks. But in the longer run, yes, we may see new groups putting their hands up for funding from the likes of Iran, or we may just see the old networks re-energized. I mean, Al-Qaeda groups across Africa are talking about what's happening. They haven't increased the tempo of attacks, but they're certainly feeding it into their messaging. The same too with Islamic State.
Yeah. Where are you seeing the most risk of activity? Where in the world? We see quite a heightened tension in Europe, for example.
Yeah, I think the epicenter of terrorism activity at the moment is the continent of Africa. That's where both Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are most active. And we're seeing things sharply deteriorate in West Africa in particular, but ongoing problems in Somalia and Kenya and elsewhere across the Sahel. I think we have to be concerned about what will happen in Afghanistan and Pakistan, given the frail nature of politics in Pakistan, the porous border there. This situation in Gaza doesn't change all of that straight away, but it'll play into it. And of course, it depends where it ends. I mean, it's bad enough this last 6 weeks. It's a tremendous tragedy that is going to define this moment in history as the 9/11 attack and response did. But this could get very much worse. I mean, things could fall apart completely for Israel and for Palestinians in the West Bank as well as in Gaza. We live in the fear of diseases like cholera breaking out in Gaza Strip. So as hard as it is to look at what's happening now, we may be seeing something much worse coming. And the impact of that around the world will be felt in the way messaging goes out by extremist groups.
And so, Greg, to that point, what is up for debate is what happens post this war, post this conflict, when Israel feels its aims have been accomplished. How do you see that playing out? What would be the most sort of resolvable way to manage Gaza, to manage the West Bank?
The only realistic solution, Bev, that I can see, and it seems pie in the sky to say it right now, is going back to the two-state solution, not the old models, because we've moved beyond that window of opportunity. But I think it's very clear that there will be no security for the people of Israel or Palestine without a just and durable political solution. Many would say a one-state solution would be better. In an ideal world, maybe that's the case. But realistically, starting with a new administration in the Gaza Strip, renewing the Palestinian Authority, it's so discredited at the moment, doesn't have support, that will need regional help. I mean, at the moment, Jordan, Egypt are saying they don't want to be a part of this. They have no reason to put their reputation on the line. And yet, at the end of the day, I think it's those neighbours that are going to be very important. Perhaps Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states will play a key role. We're seeing a movement from China at the moment. That seems unlikely, but if China can play a useful role, then why not? It will take a global coalition and a temporary administration of the Gaza Strip. Hopefully that leads to some kind of new Palestinian Authority and some hope for people in the West Bank as well. We need to see a change of leadership in Israel, of course, because this current government under Netanyahu over the last 16 years has set up the conditions that have allowed things to deteriorate. One clear lesson is that you can't use military means to solve these problems. You know, they have a role to play. Israel has to defeat Hamas at the moment, but it has to recognize this is not really a military problem that has a military solution.
Yeah. You know, you talked about the intense rise of both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic attacks around the world. What is your advice to governments to manage these heightened times for both sides so that this threat of inflaming any type of extremism doesn't flare?
One of the obvious points to make, and it's been said publicly, is we need to be very careful with our messaging. So particularly people in elected office, but everyone, all of us, media analysts as well, because it has an impact. The second thing is to be communicating. So we are seeing largely peaceful, very large rallies in support of, out of humanitarian concern for what's happening in Gaza. There's some minority elements that cause trouble around those rallies, but the vast majority are peaceful. I think the reason we're seeing that go as well as it is going is because of communication between authorities like police and rally organisers, and I think we just need to sort of press on with that. I mean, these problems can't be wished away. People's anger and emotional turmoil is not going to disappear by itself. So we need to allow people a chance to express their concerns and encourage everyone involved to do that in a way that's respectful and peaceful, because it undermines everyone's cause if we see hate speech and anger break out in ways that dehumanize the other side. That's what we're seeing at the moment that so concerns us, is this dehumanizing of the other. We're seeing some very brave voices inside Gaza and the Palestinian community, also in Israel, speaking up and saying, not in my name. We can't solve this problem with anger and with hate. We've got to come together somehow. So the global community is going to be part of that, and that puts pressure on our political leaders around the world to not turn away from this, but to be involved. So there's good and bad in this, but so far, terrible tragedy in the Gaza Strip, but a very healthy response around the world.
Yeah, Greg, always good to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Beth.